Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we are talking to Mat Wilk. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Give me just a second while I'm working through some challenges with my overlays here. Well, that's tomorrow's. Why is it showing what is going on? Why is I can't win with this thing. Okay, so something is going real weird with my scenes right now, and they're like actively rebelling, and I don't know why. Um, yeah, so now it's showing tomorrow. Cool, very cool, great. Loving this for me and my scene. So everybody, just bear with me for like a half second while I debug my own silly code. Um, Jesus. Okay, I know what I'm doing. I'm a competent developer. I can write code. How about this? How's this? How's this going to go for us? Let me switch this one over. Hey, we did it. We have the right person. So hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we have, as you can see in the name tag, Mat Wilk. Matt, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, off to an exciting start. So it is so great to have you on the show today. I'm really excited because we are continuing this special series of Observability Week. So this is day 2 of 3 this week, and then we've got a bonus episode 4 coming a little bit later in March, where we're going to be talking about observability, why it matters, how it helps developers, and I think specifically to today, why web developers should be thinking about it. Because I think a big experience for a lot of web devs is that logging, observability, tracing. That's a thing that other developers do, and web developers are like, well, no, I just console log, right? And so I think we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you. So for folks who aren't familiar, can you give us a bit of a background on you and your work?
Yeah, sure. Just a little note on your previous sentence. I think sometimes developer think that logging is just the necessary evil.
Mm.
Like also error capturing and error throwing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's changing in the industry. Now it's more accepted to do it simultaneously when you create a PR.
Mm.
Um, so this is something that is moving in the right direction. But answering your question, um, so I've been a web developer for around 16 years or so. Um, I mainly worked with big companies. I didn't start this way, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I remember during my studies, I was, building some websites for colleagues of mine, uh, not really colleagues, friends.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I got hooked. I actually studied electronics and computer science, not really programming.
Sure.
Uh, but I said to myself, okay, since I'm building websites, why not just, you know, go that direction, which I did. And after working a few years in the industry, I moved to London,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been in London for the last 10 years almost. And I had privilege to work for big companies, which I really appreciate. And I learned a lot of useful information. So in the context of observability, um, you know, it wasn't such a thing as observability when I started
Mm-hmm.
programming, and it's been progressing, and along with agile methodologies,
Mm-hmm.
along other best practices. and I think is becoming more embedded into the industry nowadays.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think like from my perspective, and I think, I'm coming from a very, I think I would have originally described myself as like a front of the front end developer. I worked primarily in the design side, the visual side, and over time I've sort of moved toward the back end of the stack a little bit more. But for me, and I think a lot of folks who would identify similarly, when we start thinking, like, if you say observability to me, I kind of know what you mean, but I think of a lot of logging is when I hit a problem, I console log. And that console log lets me identify, I'll go to my browser, I'll refresh the page, the thing breaks, I console log the error, and then I'll try to figure out what that is and go fix it. And I think that I know that there are more tools out there because I've heard of things like if you're running a backend server or your database or whatever it is, you have things like tracing and open telemetry and these really robust logging systems that give you a lot of visibility into what's going on. But I've always sort of felt like maybe that's not for me. Maybe that doesn't work on the web. But I don't think that's the case. I feel like that's maybe a thing that I believed a long time ago that's not true anymore. So how does my concept of console logging fit into the broader world of what observability enables in the modern web and app and backend space?
yeah, that's a brilliant question. Logging as a concept is like an umbrella name for a broader aspect of different things.
Hmm.
And in the industry, when we talk about logging or observability, we usually have a few different concepts in mind. And we can distinguish between different types of telemetry data. And
Hmm.
these types, we call them MELT. So it's a shortcut for metrics, events, logs, and traces.
Okay.
And there are subtle differences between all of them, and we can go through what they are. So, for example, a metric is usually a numeric measurement of an application or a system.
Hmm.
And typically it's like reported on a regular schedule. Um, what's also interesting about different types of telemetry data is that depending on the platform that you use it with, uh, you can, for example, roll the data up. So whenever you send the log data,
Hmm.
sorry, whenever you send metric data to a platform, which is typically as we define the numeric data, after some time, you don't want to use as much memory of that platform.
Okay.
So you roll the data up. And so, for example, a difference between metrics and logs is that you typically, if we log an event to a platform, we never roll it up because logs, by definition, is a message about a system uh, uh, or an activity in the system.
Hmm.
And usually the shape of the log is, let's say, an object with attributes, but they don't necessarily have to be numeric. So you can't really roll them up. So it means that logs have different shape, and usually you it's usually preferable to keep all the logs in the platform or in the system or in the file, whatever you're using the logs for, to keep them, or maybe
Okay.
in the database. Um, and they also serve a different purpose. Um, so, metric measures a specific telemetry data. So, for example, CPU. So
Okay.
let's say that we have a server that we want to measure its load, and we have the CPU usage, we have the memory usage, we have disk usage. So this is typically a metric that we want to log with metrics.
Right, right, right.
And metrics
So,
also applies to different telemetry data. So it's like also an umbrella. So when we talk about metrics, it doesn't have to be specifically metric that we just defined. It can be also a log, it can be an event, or it can be a trace. So let me just quickly go through what an event is and what the trace is.
okay.
So event is a record of something that happened in your application. And events are typically reported when something happens. So for example, let's say that a user presses a button in your application, or maybe a file is uploaded, or another example of it would be, for example, let's imagine that you have a vending machine and you are a provider of vending machines and you want to know how the vending machines are performing. So when someone buys something, you can send an event to a telemetry platform with specific attributes that, for example, a bar or a fizzy drink was purchased at that time for that price from this vending machine,
I got you.
etc., etc.
So,
And then,
okay, go ahead.
yeah. So the last concept of melt, which is the trace, is a record of the path a request has gone through in the system. Usually it applies to distributed systems. Nowadays we have microservices and we want to know, for example, whether a request went through our front end to the backend side of the application and then maybe to a third party system.
Okay. So to repeat that quickly, the acronym here is MELT, and that's short for metrics, events, logs, and tracing. And
Yes.
so a metric is some kind of quantitative data. So if I'm measuring like page load times, or I'm measuring the amount of JavaScript loaded on a given page load, or whatever that thing is, something that I can measure and chart over time, that's a metric. An event would be like if I'm trying to gauge what people are doing in my app or what actions they're taking. So somebody signs up, somebody logs in, somebody activates a new feature. That would be events. Logging would be kind of anything I want to track, what I would traditionally put in a console log. And that's sort of unstructured. It can be whatever. That's my qualitative data. And then tracing would be if I have my API deployed to serverless functions. I've got my front end deployed on Netlify, Vercel, whatever. And then I've got a database over here and I don't know, maybe some other services in there. Then tracing would be when somebody clicks this button, it hits this API, and then that goes to the database, and then that comes back. And so I can see kind of how things move through my collected systems that I've put together. Is that a good overview?
Yeah, that's a very good understanding of it. Typically, traces are related to HTTP requests when we talk about web development. So basically, whatever is related, maybe not whatever is related, but from the technical perspective, how it works is that you usually add a header to a HTTP request, and you send this header via different systems that you're maintaining. And thanks to that header, for example, an ID, you're able to record that to a database or to a telemetry platform.
Gotcha.
And this way you're able to recognize what systems this HTTP request gone through.
Yeah.
And one more point about logs. Logs are typically used to recognize problems in the system. Not necessarily, but we'll see later when we go through our pairing exercise that you can have different types of logs. For example, debug logs, error logs, info logs.
Right. Yeah, so it sort of gives you a more holistic picture of what's happening within your app, which is, I think, maybe this is the part where I start to see how it does connect the dots for web developers, because a lot of times when somebody would say something like tracing to me or event logging or things like that, it sort of, I just kind of glazed over. I was like, oh, well, somebody else handles that, right? Like the DevOps team will put that together. And it didn't really occur to me that a lot of the things that I would think of as somebody else's responsibility are things that I'm already doing. So a good example of this is like events. I mean, I'm constantly asked, well, I guess when I was working at companies, I was constantly asked by the product team, like, hey, can you put these event logs in we want amplitude events to see when somebody converts, to see when somebody activates this feature. Okay, so that's a piece of observability that I wasn't really considering to be a part of that process. I was always trying to measure the core web vitals, the lighthouse scores, things like that of people using my sites. And I'd try to use a tool that would give me real user measurements and not just my synthetic tests of like, I ran a lighthouse test on my own machine and it seemed fast, right? So I'm already doing a lot of these things that would be considered observability, but I'm doing each of them in a really like unmanaged way. Like my performance metrics are, I don't know, over here in a pile, or like I don't keep them at all. I just kind of look at what the scores were for the last 24 hours and then never look at them again. I don't have any trends over time. I don't have any way to say like, oh, our core web vitals in like Australia are garbage. We need to fix that. I just know that like, yeah, on average, like it's okay. Like it's pretty fine. I don't see outliers or anything like that. And then the same with the events, like it goes into amplitude or it goes into a tool, similar to that, where I throw it into a hole and like maybe product uses it and maybe they don't, but I don't get any information back that helps me understand how people are using my apps. And then there's other pieces that I just hadn't really considered how useful they would be, like tracing, where I know, like for the systems I've worked on, that my form submits to a serverless function, which calls out to this third-party API, which then responds back to the serverless function and then gives me my data in the app. But nobody else on the team knows that. They don't know how I built that thing. So having that tracing where I can see like, oh, these are the components in the system and this is how they're all connected together, so that I can make more informed decisions about how I'm going to debug something, how I'm going to make choices about, how we grow the system in the future. Those are all pieces of information that I have wanted and in certain cases have used in, I would say, less than optimal ways, because it's all been very efficient, ad hoc kind of stuff. And so what you're telling me is that if we're intentional about this as web developers, we can kind of put all of these things together under one umbrella that we call observability and use it in a way where I actually have visibility into my application. So can you talk a little bit about how does that work? If I want to pull all of these pieces of data together, which sound useful, and I want to be able to look at them, how do I do that?
Yeah, I guess there are different ways of doing that. You know, typically what's been happening in the industry in the recent years is that you would be provided with an agent, so-called agent, a small program that would be deployed either to your browser with your application or maybe to your server with your application. And this would collect telemetry data.
Mm-hmm.
And this is still a standard, really. But there is a trend of open telemetry, which is
Mm-hmm.
a new standard, new kid on the block, let's say. And because you don't want to really be vendor specific, you don't want to be locked into a specific vendor. So
Right.
a lot of teams nowadays start experimenting with open telemetry, but it's like having an agent installed on a machine or in the browser is still a standard nowadays.
Okay. Yeah. Well, cool. So this is, in this video, Observability Week is all kind of brought to us by New Relic. And so New Relic, the intention of New Relic is to give us the ability to sort of put all of the things we care about across the entire melt spectrum into one dashboard to give us a little more visibility, like something that theoretically, if anybody still worked in an office, we could have one big TV and just show the New Relic dashboard and we'd be able to identify quickly like, hey, something's going wrong with the website.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what I would add to it is that you can also monitor different parts of your application
Mm,
uh, using different metrics. But I guess as we go through the exercise, we can talk about it in more detail.
sure, sure. Well, and maybe that's as good a time as any to make the transition over and start working on a little bit of code so we can show how this works instead of just talking about it. So let me switch into pair programming mode here. And I'm going to have to fix my scenes again real quick. Everybody please hold while I do that. That's the one. Here we go. Hey! All right, fix it on the first try that time at least. All right, so before we get started, and let me pull this off so it's not as confusing for everybody, let's talk a little bit about our show. We've got live captions on this show like we do on every show. Thank you to Ashley from White Coat Captioning, who is here taking down all these words. Observability Week is a special partnership with our sponsor, New Relic. So thank you, New Relic, for making this possible. And thanks to Netlify, NX, and Pluralsight, who are also pitching in to make this show more accessible, more fun, give us a little more bandwidth to do more creative things. It means a lot to me. We are talking today to Mat Wilk. You are at webdev.engineer, which is a great URL, by the way. Let me throw that in here for everybody who wants to follow along. And we are talking today about how to do observability specifically using New Relic. So I'm going to throw that in the chat as well. Okay, so Matt, at this point, I have sort of reached the end of what I know to do here. So why don't we... Just opened in the wrong window. Come on, don't be like that. You come over here. There we go. All right. So this is me on the web. Just a web dev looking at an expert, asking for a little guidance. What should I do first?
All right. So I'm guessing you have access to GitHub.
I do indeed.
And the link that I've sent.
Yes, let's get that
which
first link
was
here. So here's the
Yeah.
repo we're going to be working from today. This is a Create T3 app, which we haven't really used T3 app on Learn with Jason. We have used the component pieces. So Next.js, TypeScript, TRPC. We've done a little bit of Tailwind. And that is our starting point. So let me get this link here. Actually, I just realized this the other day.
Yeah, so if you switch to the main branch, yeah, that's the one.
So I can copy this here. So if I come out to my terminal and I'm going to, we'll actually just do it right here and clone this repo.
So whilst you're doing that, this is a T3 app with the standard T3 components, as you've mentioned, which is the Next.js, TypeScript, Tailwind, TRPC. Actually, when I was preparing this demo, I was learning TRPC as I was preparing it. And also what's interesting is that I was watching your videos as well whilst doing that.
Yeah, there's a great episode with Alex Cat, who did TRPC, the creator of TRPC. And so if we pull that up, here is an episode if you want to dig a little bit deeper into what TRPC is and how it works. Thank you for the sub,
there was
Josh
one more
Departs.
episode, but yeah, sorry. So there was one more episode that really helped me, the Tanstack query, because I had some issues with rendering. I wanted to add animations, and then I realized that you've talked about a specific thing, a property that you can pass to Tanstack query, which keeps the previous result from the HTTP call, and this really helped me, work on the animation and make it work, because otherwise the whole thing would re-render, and I wouldn't be able to get results the way I wanted them to be.
Yeah. This episode this is one of my favorite episodes that we've done. Dominic was such a great teacher. The tan stack query stuff is really, it's just very nice to use. So that is a good one to check out. And welcome to 425 show and Raiders. Thank you all for coming by. Really excited. The launch window I'm using, this is a browser called Arc. So if you are interested in checking this one out, it's called Arc. I love it. I use it all the time. Okay, so I've cloned this repo and I have opened it up in VS Code. So I'm looking at the repo here.
Yeah, so probably a few things that are worth mentioning is that it's a typical directory structure as you get it with Create T3 app.
Okay.
There's nothing special about it. I left everything on default pretty much. I've added a few subpages. So there is a blog page.
Okay.
And there is the main page, obviously. And there is a posts page. And there is also about page. But mainly we're going to be working with the blog page and the posts page.
Okay.
So maybe we can just go through it and see how it looks like. So if you just npm install.
Yeah, so I ran the npm install already. So I'm going to start it up. I'm going to make the assumption that this uses npm run dev. Yep. I'm missing environment variables. Okay, so I need.
Oh yeah. So you're missing. There is the .env.example. So if you just rename it to .env, that should fix the issue. We're just missing next out URL. Well, we're not really using it, but
it's saying it needs this this Discord client ID. Do I need to?
Yes. Because since it's a default T3 stack, it means that the main page actually wants you to use the out to log.
So it wants to use
we're not going to be using it, right?
Got it. So we just need to make sure it's defined.
Yeah.
Okay. So here is our local host, and it's now doing the thing. And so because we're not using the next auth, we can just ignore this part. So we've got our homepage here, and then you said we're looking specifically at our blog posts. So here is a list of our blog posts, and those show up.
Scroll down and you can. You can scroll down and you can also press load more. So it's gonna load more posts.
Nice.
And what we're using under the hood is the JSON placeholder API.
Got it.
So what happens is that the front end is sending a request to the backend of our application, and then the backend is sending a request to JSON placeholder API. And JSON placeholder API, for people that don't know, is just a API that you can test your things with.
Yeah, it gives you, you just give it an object shape and it comes back with lorem ipsum in all of those objects, right?
And you can also press on one of the blog posts and it's going to redirect you to the posts page with the ID of the post.
Yeah. So this is great. This is kind of exactly what I would expect a blog to function like. I've got a /blog, which shows me my previews. When I go in, each blog has its own specific URL, in this case under /posts, and then the ID of the post. And then we've got a homepage to kind of tell everybody where we are and what we're doing. So this is great. So what should we do next?
Yeah. So we want to integrate the new Relic browser agent with the application. Mm-hmm. So what the browser agent is for, it helps us pull all the telemetry data, and we'll talk about what exactly telemetry data is from the front-end perspective, but it pulls all the telemetry data from our front-end application and sends it to the platform. So now we're going to be focusing on making sure that we're able to get the New Relic browser agent integrated with the app and send the data to the platform, to New
And
Relic
each of
platform.
the browser agent is something that I can install manually in a generic way, but you also have specific agents for specific frameworks, right? And so the T3 app is using Next.js, so there's just like a Next.js agent, right?
So it's a good question. Um, so what happens is that we have the browser agent, which cares only
Mm-hmm.
about the front-end pages.
Okay.
So we don't really need to. So we don't need to worry about the backend or the Next.js or Node.js,
Okay.
and we're gonna use the Node agent as well,
Okay.
uh, which will help us integrate the backend things of the app because Next.js is a meta framework which uses Node.js and Express under the hood.
Okay.
Uh, I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's so, and this is one of the things that can be a little tricky if you're not familiar with how a meta framework like Next works. Is it's executing in like multiple contexts. So part of Next runs in Node, part of it runs in the browser, and you just kind of have to know which is which so that you can instrument that properly. And if we want to get data, we need to instrument both places. Okay, so if I want to do the browser agent, where should I start?
Okay, so there are two different ways of integrating the browser agent.
Mm-hmm.
One is a copy paste method, which is a bit menial, so we'll skip that one.
Okay.
But it's worth mentioning that it's possible. So basically, you can just copy paste the browser agent script and put it into the head of your application, and then it will, run a script as you visit a page and send the telemetry data to your application. But instead, we want to go for a more convenient method,
Mm-hmm.
which is an npm package, and it's a New Relic npm package.
Okay.
So
Which one is it?
this package, yeah, it's called New Relic npm. So basically, if you just npm install New Relic,
This one here.
yes, this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. This is the New Relic node agent, and what node agent is able to do is also able to return a browser agent for us. It has a
I
specific
gotcha.
method to return the script. So
All
instead
right.
of copy pasting from the New Relic UI, we can just use a method from the from the node agent to return the browser agent. Yes, I
Gotcha.
think
Okay.
I said it correctly.
So we have that set up and it's now installed. So I'm going to hide that terminal. If I want to use it,
Okay. Yeah, we need one more thing. Well, actually, we need a couple of more things,
oh,
but
okay.
let's go through them step by step. So the other thing that we're gonna need is the either a New Relic configuration file, or you can. So when you install the New Relic npm package, if you want it to work properly with your subscription to the platform, well, actually, it can be a free tier as well. Um, you need to know the API key, uh, and you need to provide the API key to the New Relic node agent. So I'm
Okay. And that's
just
this file
looking.
here, or I need to actually run this here.
Hmm, I can't see it clearly.
Make it a little bit
Uh,
bigger.
yeah,
So
let's go
it's
with this one actually.
okay. So I'm going to run this and we'll copy it to new relic.js. So here's our new
Actually, yes, let's do
relic.js.
that. And I think we're gonna have TypeScript complaining. So if you change the file name to CJS, it's gonna
To CJS.
fix it. Yeah, CJS.
And then TypeScript leaves us alone. Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So there are two things that we need to do here. We don't need to worry about the configuration. It's the default configuration we're going to use. The only two properties that we need to worry about is the application name and the license key.
Okay. So for my application, I assume now is when I go to the New Relic dashboard. So I'm going to log in. And good. All right. Active session limit reached. What?
Yeah, so if you just kill the earliest session.
Okay. Here we go.
So
I'm in.
yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so go to in the bottom left corner. If you press this button and then API keys,
Okay.
you can copy paste. I'm seeing that you've already created some API keys. So for example, if you copy the second from the top API key,
Okay.
the three dots, and then copy key, and copy
This
it
one
to
I
the
want to do
license
off
key,
screen, right?
preferably, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to pull this off. Well, actually, hold on. Before I do that, let's set the application name. So can this just be anything I want, or do I need to define one in the New Relic
It can
dashboard?
be anything you want. It can be anything you want.
Okay, so we're going to say T3 app observability week. Okay, and then I'm going to go replace this with my license key. And I assume I just don't commit this to GitHub is how we make that work?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I've saved that, and it's now closed so that we don't leak those details. And next I need
So
to...
probably it's a good time to mention. Yeah, sorry for interrupting. So it's probably a good time to mention that you don't have to use the New Relic configuration file. You can use environment variables as well. So whenever you deploy to production, you don't have to worry about the configuration file. You just use environment variables instead.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm going to come down to the bottom, and I'm going to include my New Relic .cjs so that doesn't get committed to GitHub, so that'll get ignored now. And now I think the next step was I had to actually execute this. Is that right?
Let me think whether there is anything else we need to do. So we're integrating the browser agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we need to pull the New Relic browser agent script and include it into the head of the application.
Okay.
So in the pages document tsx file, which actually is not a standard file which is included. Well, I mean, when you create T3 stack, this file is usually not included in the build.
Yeah, this is
So
sort of
whenever,
like an advanced Next.js use case, because by default they
this
sort
is
of
a
put this in
fancy,
one way.
yes, exactly. So I created this file for us, so we don't have to write it from scratch. So what we want to do here, we want to first of all import the New Relic package.
Okay. And is it the default like this?
Yes, is the default, yeah. And what we're doing here, we're getting the New Relic node agent. So what's interesting about this underscore document file is that it's run only on the backend side. And usually you use it when you want to, for example, change the HTML or the body of your entire application. So for example, when you want to include some scripts like New Relic browser agent script, then it's a perfect place to do it. And actually, there is also a New Relic types package, which we can also install, so we don't have to TS ignore.
Okay. So is that npm install?
npm add new relic /types, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's not the one.
Let me check. It's add types /new relic.
At type / new relic. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Amazing. And now.
Now it's not unhappy. There we go.
Yes. So now we want to get the New Relic browser agent script from the package.
Okay.
And to do that, we need to call a method which is called get browser timing header. So basically, we need to do it inside. Let me check. Yeah, we need to do it inside the document.
Okay.
Like online 10. Yeah, online 10. Let's do it online 10.
Okay.
And then there's one more trick we need to do here, which is a property. And this property, so the method takes a object as an argument, and the property name has to remove script wrapper.
Okay.
And this we want to set to true. So what this does, it removes the script wrapper. So basically, when you call this method, normally you would get a New Relic browser agent wrapped in a script tag, HTML script tag. But since we don't want that here, we're just getting rid of the script wrapper, and the browser agent is just a script. Okay.
Gotcha.
And the next thing we want to do is the Next.js has a concept of script. So if we import script from Next.js script.
Is it next script or is it like script?
Yes, it's next script.
Okay. Wait, is there a different one? Because I think this is like the next bootstrapping stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a, if you put your cursor on line
that's not
4, I think. Yes, line 4.
Okay.
And import script starting from capital letter from next script, exactly.
Got it. Okay. So then that's going to go in the head, you said?
Yes, that's going to go in the head. And this script needs, so this is a self-containing tag. So we want to use a property. So it requires a property which is called ID. And this is just a string, so you can call it New Relic browser agent or whatever.
Okay.
Then the other thing is the dangerously set inner HTML.
Oh, almost got there. Dangerously set. Oh, come on. You were right there. Okay. And that's the browser agent?
It has to be an object. So inside of the object that we already have, we need another object with a property of HTML. Yeah.
It's double underscore or single underscore?
Double underscore. And also the browser agent has to be, so because we return props from the getInitialProps method, it has to be this.props.
I need to include that here.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are you mad?
And we'll get rid of the TypeScript error in a sec. So,
and so this needs to be props. So I'm pulling props in from here. God, I have not used a class style.
I would just use this .props.browser agent.
Okay.
And we now need to get rid of the TypeScript error.
Yep.
So we need to define a type at the top of the file, which is document props, let's say.
Okay.
And this equals to the browser agent, which is a string. And
Okay.
then we need to pass it to the document. So here, if you open the on line 10, if you open the triangle brackets, I guess you can call them. Sorry, not this, not my document. At the extend
this
document.
one.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Yeah. Document props.
Okay.
And then in the promise as well.
In the promise, document initial props.
13. Yeah. After the document initial props. And yes, document props. And I hope it's gonna make our TypeScript type errors go away. At least it should.
So it's saying that it still has an any value, and I feel like we can potentially just kind of tell it to go away. Oh, it's still mad. How dare you? Okay. I can also just turn off TypeScript.
That's one of the options.
I
mean, it's a development environment, so we can run it without any issues, because only when we build it would fail, but not on during dev. So we can leave it at that, to be honest.
Okay. Okay, and
For
so
now.
that's in there. That works. Okay.
Oh, one more thing actually. So this script, the next script tag, which is an interesting concept, because you can pass also a strategy property to it. So if we also add after the the other one, the one that we passed the browser agent to.
I got you.
And we can use different strategies, and we want to use before interactive strategy. So it means that our script is going to be loaded before the page is becoming interactive. So as soon as possible, pretty much this is what we're saying to Next.js.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think that should be pretty much it. We have the key. We have the browser agent. We included in the script tag in the head. So I think we can try it out.
Okay, let's try it out. So I'm going to start the server again. npm run dev. And we've already got this one running in here.
Are we getting any errors in the console? Just want to make sure that everything is, sorry, in the IDE.
Sorry, say again.
Oh, by the way, yeah, sorry. So actually, we can check it here whether the browser agent is included. So if you right click on the page.
If I right click on the page.
Yes, view page source. We should be able to see the browser agent script.
Turn on the line wrap.
Somewhere
that might
here.
make it easier. Here is our script.
So this big blob of text is the browser agent script.
Got it. Okay.
So it's good. And then we also can check it in the network tab.
Yeah, it looks like
so if you
my browser by default is blocking New Relic scripts, which is not ideal. And so I need to figure out how to
Okay, I see.
How about we just turn this off? Thank you. Okay.
Looks better.
So that's better. We've got things are doing what we expect now. So we've got all those pieces in here. We are loading the New Relic agent. Here it is, and I think that's the thing, right? Can I go and look at this now?
Yes, please. Let's
Okay,
see.
so I go into those weren't visible. Okay, so I'm going to come back here, and then where would I look to actually see this?
Yeah, so the browser on the left-hand
Browser.
side, and then
Here's the one I just
the
created.
application name. Yeah,
Great.
and we should see some data coming in.
Yeah, it's saying that our cumulative layout shift needs a little work. We've got user time on the site. That's cool. You can see, initial page
Yes.
loads. So this is good. This is useful information, right? We can, and if I kind of collapse this down, you get slightly more compact dashboards, which is really nice. This is, yeah, so immediately, like with just that one change, we already start to get some good data where we can see user-centric page load times. We've got, I don't know what front end versus back end means. Can you?
Yes, front-end versus backend is the time that is spent on the front-end side of things and the backend side of things in relation to HTTP requests.
Gotcha. Okay. And then we've got our like load and route change. Perfect. Okay, so this is looking good. So if I come back out here and click around a little bit, so we'll click into one of these posts. We'll go to the home page. We'll come back to the post. We'll load more. Do another quick page load, and then if we come back out here, we should have even more data showing up, which is what we wanted. So we can kind of see really quickly that this data starts to become useful. Like we can see what's going on. We can see how long the page is taking to load, and all of those details that we care about, which is exactly what I want. And I like that I didn't have to think very hard about it. You know, you put that browser agent in, and you just get that insight for free, which is really nice.
Yeah, and this is like a curated view of the most important telemetry data that a front-end developer would care about.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the error rate, which for now is at 0, which is great, which doesn't happen that often. We have the web vitals, which are crucial if it comes to web development. Basically, what this page focuses on is the user-centric experience. So you want to make sure by looking at this page that your users are happy with the performance of your web page.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we have all of this data surfaced here in this curated view.
Gotcha.
And we can navigate to any of those charts and dig deeper. So for example, if you click on any of them, we can immediately see that, for example, the cumulative layout shift is not performing as expected. And I
On the
know why,
blog
by the way.
page, but it's
On
fine
the blog
on the post page, for example.
Yeah.
So, and this is also really useful because, I mean, let's be honest, y'all. How many of you are actually checking every page? Like you check your home page, you maybe check your most critical landing pages, but you never check like an individual blog post or something like that. So being able to see like, oh, we've got this one page that takes forever to load and we don't, how are you going to identify that unless you actually navigate to that page? And for the vast majority of us, the sites we work on, we don't navigate around to a lot of the sub pages all that often. You work on the page that you're working on and you kind of move on to the next thing. So having something that'll alert you about individual pages is really helpful.
And if we had users from different parts of the globe, which you can see below, we could also see a split between, for example, how the page performs in this country, how the page performs in the other country. And another amazing thing about it is that, developers are usually biased towards their own tests. so to speak. So whenever you create a end-to-end test, you can imagine what a user would do, but it's not usually the case, right? Users can be unpredictable, so they can like behave in a way that a developer never imagined. And this view can also highlight some issues with certain pages or certain behaviors of the user.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and you can see all sorts of stuff like, I'm not going to check every browser on every device type on every operating system. It's just not going to happen. So being able to see quickly like, holy crap, everybody using Safari is getting errors is hey, maybe we should go look into that.
Fortunately, we don't have to worry about Internet Explorer anymore.
But yeah, okay. So we've got the browser agent installed, and this gives us visibility into the client side. But a lot of what happens on Next is going to be server side. So we've got some API services here. We've got, I assume, some serverless functions because I saw an API folder. And there's also just like the building part of Next itself, which we might care about. So how do we go further? How do we get more of this put together?
Okay, so now I'm going to surprise you because we actually have already instrumented the backend application. There is a one catch though, which we'll talk about in a sec. But if you go to the APM, so on the left-hand side in the menu, you should see the APM and services, and we should have the service already there.
Interesting. Okay.
So
how did this work?
We've got it already because, yeah, we've got it already because we installed the New Relic node package, and it picks up the configuration that we also included in the application, and it sends all the node telemetry data to the platform. So because we use the New Relic npm package and configured it with the configuration file, we said to the package, here is the configuration file, here's the node application,
fascinating,
and send whatever the application is doing to the platform.
And so this is the package is just smart enough to know that here's a file, and so whenever I'm actually kind of at a loss as to how this works. How does it function?
Let me yes. Yes, okay. Let me explain. So the New Relic package that we installed is a npm package, right? That is able to monitor Node.js applications.
Right.
And it also has a few like integrations out of the box. And one of these integrations is for Express, Netlify. I think there is also an integration for Netlify. Actually, if we go to the Node modules and open the New Relic package, and I think it would be lib and integrations or something like that.
Aggregators, collectors,
instrumentations.
Here we go. Here's a big old list. We've got AWS. Let's see what else is in here. Here's Express, Fastify. Here's
Koa, Redis.
Prisma
so there are a few packages out of the box. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. And it just knows to use these.
Yeah. And also something that we're hopefully gonna have time to talk about is it has also a logging frameworks integration. But it's not fully functional yet. So if you go back to the New Relic UI and go to distributed tracing here on the left-hand side, we can see there is this small icon. If you could just in the middle of this panel, there is this small arrow to the left. If you just could close that, because yeah, this one, right? Thank you. So what we're seeing here is that now the node agent thinks that all the requests have the same path. So it is not able to recognize whether we're asking for the blog page or whether we're asking for the post page, and whether there is any TRPC instrumentation, or maybe this is GraphQL, or maybe a standard HTTP.
Okay.
So now what we need to include is the next package. So there is the New Relic next package that we want to include.
Okay, so let me drop a link to that into the chat, and then we'll open up. Oops, not there. This one here. So this is the package, and I'm going to come in here, open up the terminal again, stop this and say npm install New Relic next. Okay.
Yep. And the one more thing that we need to do is to modify our dev and start script, if we're using it in the build, in the production mode. And we need to use a node option.
Okay.
So if you just type node underscore options, like all capital letters, because this is like an environment variable. So we're telling node to run our application with a specific options, and then open single quote.
Okay.
-r, and then name of the package, which is add New Relic next, and close the quote.
Okay.
And that's it. And let's restart the server.
Okay.
And probably we need to navigate.
So let's go back out to our site here. We're going to go into a blog post. We'll go home. We'll come back. Let's navigate a little bit more. Click into the blog again. Maybe one of these. Get over here. Okay, so we've navigated around a little bit. Now I'm going to come back over here. And it'll take a second for this to show up, right?
Yeah, it's going to take a second. And the reason why is because distributed tracing is sampled. So, you know, it doesn't collect every request, because in most cases it would be an overkill. It usually takes some time for the logs to, for the traces to show up.
Okay.
But maybe in the meantime,
what we just did is something that I think is maybe like brand new to a lot of devs, which is we didn't install anything into our app. We're just telling Node that when it starts to pull the New Relic next package into memory, which allows it to then automatically modify whatever it needs to modify to send that data.
Yeah, so what the package does under the hood, it wraps the Next.js handlers with specific methods that are exposed by the New Relic node package to collect the data.
Gotcha. Cool. So should we do something else and come back to this, or do you want to look at the... I know that you set one up. Like we did a little bit of the like, you know, where it's a cooking show where you make up a cake and then you put it in the oven and then magically there's a cake already cooked in the oven, because we knew that some of these things would take a little time. So I can switch over to the other service if we want to show how this works, or we can keep going and then go to the finished one once we've got all the pieces in place.
Yeah, I guess we can show the distributed tracing in the other service,
Okay, so I
which is
would go
already
in here
instrumented.
and I go to the finished one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here is our distributed tracing. And how do we, how do you interpret this?
Yeah, so normally, because this is a dev environment, right? So we have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of calls that are related to this specific dev environment. So you can see that Next.js something, or maybe Webpack or whatever. But normally you would have like the standard
Mm-hmm.
TRPC calls. So what we can do to simplify it, we can, in the search box, you can just type TRPC. Sorry, not this one, the one below. There is
Oh,
the search box just below the graphs, this gray
just
one.
below the graphs. Oh,
Here,
this one.
here,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
And now what we did, we just filtered out all the TRPC related calls. So as you
Got
can
it.
see, there is the get all posts or get
Mm-hmm.
post by ID, and this shows us. Okay, yeah. So
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
um,
let me go back and then I'll go when you tell me.
no, that's fine. You can navigate straight away. But yeah, so what we can see here is that it groups our calls
Mm-hmm.
into traces, and traces are combined of spans, so-called, and a span represent a piece of work that a application does. So for example, if you now press on any of those, we can see that first of all, here on the left hand side where you're hovering over is our browser app.
Yeah. So check this out. It's a little small, but you can see it says browser application here. And then
Exactly.
it shows the call. And this is our services, which is the API, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This is really this is handy because we can see this is like where the touch points were in our application that did work. And being able to see them sort of put together like this is really handy because, otherwise you just have to know that.
And what else you can see here is if you press on, first of all, you can expand all. There is this expand all on the left hand side. Um, I
I don't
hope
know
you
that
can
there's
expand
anything to
it.
expand in
I
this one.
can't see much. Okay, yeah. So if you just press on any of those, like because we have two rows. So one row is showing us the backend call, and
Mm-hmm.
the row above it shows us the frontend call. And the way I instrumented the application, I on purpose uh, created a different errors. So
Mm.
the way the application works is that there is like a 5% or 10% chance of an error. And
Oh, okay.
we what you did here, you selected a trace with an error.
Mm-hmm.
So from what I'm seeing here, this uh, normally, if it was a fully functioning call, it would also show us the another call to the JSON placeholder API. But apparently, this one didn't even reach the API. So it went from the backend, from the front end to the backend, and there was an error, 500 error. But if you
Okay.
press on,
Here. Okay. So
yeah,
here's one that actually failed. So I'm going to expand all, and these are all of our things. So we've got our front end code, and here's the error that we got, and then we've got the um,
and yeah,
API code.
and then we have the call to the JSON placeholder API, which you can see the
Got it.
parameters of in the description, and it also shows us whether there was an error or not.
Mm-hmm. And then this one here, if I can. Oh, there's uninstrumented time. So there's kind of like the in between stuff. So
Yeah, and the reason why it's uninstrumented is because basically I'm kind of uh, created this app with like a lot of errors,
mm-hmm.
and these errors can sometimes overlap. So that's why, these traces might come over to the platform as uninstrumented because there were so many errors on the way.
Okay. Right, because
Yeah.
if there's an
So
error, then there's nothing to like. If it fails before it can even report, then it's just like, hey, something went wrong and we don't know what it was.
yeah,
I got you. But again, this is cool because we can see too. Like here's one that succeed or that didn't succeed, but that got further than the last one, where it shows us where the data went and ends up at this third party system, so we can kind of see, hey, there was a failure over here somewhere. And I guess you're kind of just like simulating a failure here, which then we can find that in the trace and see that yeah, we got a 500 error.
yeah.
It's useful
And
information.
yeah, and also you can imagine that it doesn't have to be a third-party API. It can also be a database. So you could instrument New Relic with a database, and you would see the calls from your backend to the database, and you could also see a performance of the database, what's going on in the database side of things, and etc. etc. Maybe try just refreshing the whole page here.
And it might be that I didn't do enough to get sampled too, because I only did a few clicks.
And did we? Yeah, that's possible. And did we restart the app after instrumenting? Yes, we
We
did.
did, yeah. So I'll just, you know what? We saw it in action. We know that it'll happen eventually. Sampling is a good thing because you don't want to be sending literally every transaction. That would be murderous on a system that had more than even a few hundred users, probably. But yeah, so this is great. What else should we be looking? Is there any other instrumentation that we want to do, or are we fully set now?
There are a few interesting things we can do. So we talked about metrics, which we instrumented, that we seen the metrics in the console. So like throughput, error rate, all of these are metrics. We instrumented the distributed tracing, which we're seeing on the screen now. So we're left with logs and events. So I think that logs might be more interesting.
Okay.
Um,
I'm gonna go to
so
logs.
let's go ahead and instrument the logs. So here you are in the instrumented app already. So
Am I?
probably we want to yes, I think so. You're in the
How do I check? This is all logs.
yes, this is all logs. Yeah, that's actually a good point. So if we go to APM and services
APM and services.
and click on the app that we are working on, and then
And
logs.
then we've got here. Okay. So now
Yeah,
we've got here and we have no logs found. So we want to get these
exactly.
logs here.
Yeah. So as I've mentioned earlier, New Relic node package can kind of out of the box instrument with logging frameworks. And New Relic supports Pino framework and Winston framework. These are quite popular logging frameworks. So let's install Pino framework
Okay.
with npm. So
PM install, and that's
what we're
P. Is it
yeah,
just Pino like
yeah
that?
that's that's exactly
Okay.
the package that we want to install. And it's pretty straightforward to use with New Relic. So normally, when you log data, right, there are a few considerations you need to make. Like, for example, where you want to log the data, whether you want to log the data via an API, maybe you want to put it into a file. Then you need to worry about how to send this file to somewhere, right? How to digest the file, how to search for logs in that file. So there are like a lot of different things that you need to consider if you were to log without a platform.
Right.
But with a platform like New Relic, you can simply send logs to the platform and you don't have to think about all of these things because you already have the endpoint The instrumentation is already there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and create a file
Okay.
under utils. I think there should be a util directory,
Okay. New file in utils.
logger ts.
Okay.
So here we just want to import the Pinio framework. And then we want to export const logger equals Pinio. That's pretty much it. Pinio is a function.
It's a
Yeah,
function.
but it's gonna run like that as well.
Okay. All right.
There are
So
some parameters you can pass to it, but we don't really have to.
Okay.
Um, so now what we want to do, we want to log an event.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go to a services, I think. Sorry, server. Let me double check. Routers and posts.
Okay.
So these two procedures are the one that we've seen in distributed tracing. So there is the get post by ID
Mm-hmm.
and get all posts. Also, what you can see on line 21 is that there is a 5% chance of throwing an error.
Yeah.
It's just an error. So this is what I did, and this is why we've seen these errors in the other instrumentation.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do here, we want to import the logger that we've just created. I think it was, yeah, utils logger.
I think that was
And
a named
then,
export. Was it?
no,
Yeah.
I don't think it was named.
Okay, so we've got our logger.
Yes, and now let's say that we want to log that we, for example, got to the get all posts page. So in the just before or maybe after the call to fetch, you can type logger.info and a message.
Okay. So we've got our logger.
Maybe you could also include the limit and page so that we have like additional information.
Oh, I got you.
So there are two ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So your framework is smart enough, and we can provide, for example, an object as a first parameter with those properties.
Okay, so I just throw in limit, page, and that's it?
Yeah, and that's it.
That's pretty slick.
And now I don't think we need to restart anything. The dev environment should restart.
I don't have it running. Let me start it up again.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, it's off to the races. I am going back out to my site here, and this should be the one that loads all posts, right? So I'm gonna just navigate a couple more times.
Or you can just press load more a couple of times.
Oh yeah, good call. So I'll go to my console here, and let's load more. And load more again. Okay.
And if you go back to your IDE, you should see the logs in your IDE actually.
Ah, here they are. Okay.
So this is what Pinio produces for a developer. But at the same time, the New Relic npm package also collect all the logs and send it to New Relic. So if we switch to the UI now,
now we have
we
logs.
should see the logs coming in. Yeah. And if you press on any of those, we could also see the properties that you send, which is the page and the limit property.
Yeah, here's our limit. And here's our page. This is slick. This is really nice.
And also there is one more feature which I really like, is that when you have a distributed trace,
Mm-hmm.
the log is automatically correlated with the trace for you. So if we go to the distributed tracing, and hopefully we're gonna have more traces now.
Looks like it's done it for us now. Good.
Yeah.
Did it get any of the
This was
TRPC stuff?
yeah.
Still hasn't sampled any of the TRPC.
That's
But it is picking things up, which is good. It's just not picking up. It hasn't yet hit that particular route. So eventually it would get those, and then that would correlate it, right? And just time checking, we got about 3 minutes left here.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to the other project, which is already instrumented. So we just quickly see how this works together.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess just go to one of the TRPC endpoints.
Okay, so we're going to open up TRPC. I'm going to get into the get all posts, and we've
maybe, yeah, just select any of those.
Okay.
I think we should have. Well, actually, this one is not automatically correlated with the log, but let's try a different one with an error. So the one that has a error,
Mm-hmm.
and there is so at the top you can see another tab which is called logs, and what it does, it automatically correlates the log with the HTTP request. And
that
also
is super helpful, because like what I always want to do is I want to do like a console.error if something goes wrong. But the problem is that if I'm shipping this out into the world, my users have to know how to open the console. They have to know how to find that error. They need to be willing to take the time to send it through to me. But if I've got this distributed trace here and the error that comes through is connected to that, I can go find my errors and just go look. I don't have to rely on my users to even know that an error occurred for me to get info that lets me debug it. So this, to me, this feels like where it starts to become like, this is why you do this work. This is why you instrument things, is if you're building an app and you need to have visibility into, like, is my app good or does it only run on my machine? Like, am I getting errors? You know, I get emails sometimes from people who are like, hey, your website broke. And I'm like, oh, what happened? And then they try to explain and I can't replicate the error. And then you just kind of end in a shrug. You're like, well, let's see if it happens again, I guess. This eliminates that problem. If somebody reports an error, I go into New Relic, I look for the failures, and I can see what happened. Oh, I like at this particular time of day, there's this weird overlap where my dates are wrong, or whatever the heck is going on with my scenes today that was causing me to see yesterday's and then tomorrow's stuff. Who knows why that was going on? But where we landed is, you know, I need to be able to solve that problem, and this would give me visibility as opposed to what I've been doing in the past, which is educated guesses.
yeah, exactly. And you know, the correlation is beneficial because you don't have to sift through all the logs and search for the date, search for the time, and maybe correlate it somehow, you know, magically, which is virtually impossible, right? How you correlate a log with a timestamp with a call that happened or maybe it didn't happen. And here you have everything on a single pane of glass.
Yeah, and that is really nice. So there's a question in the chat. This is like Sentry. So we've had Sentry on the show before, and Sentry does give you errors. Is there anything that's like notably different that you're aware of? But we don't need to get into like a straight up like shot for shot comparison here. But like, are there things in addition to the error reporting that you get from Sentry that make New Relic worth investing in?
I'm not really familiar with Sentry, to be honest.
Okay. So that's a question for another time.
Yeah.
But this is, so with our last like 1 minute here, is there anything else that you wanted to look at on this fully instrumented site before we wrap it up?
Maybe if we go to error inbox, this is something that is worth mentioning. And yeah, this you just stay in the APM
Oh, stay in the
and
APM.
services,
Okay.
yeah,
And I'll look at my
and
finished app
yeah,
and
and error
inbox
inbox.
here.
Yeah, so here you also have like errors grouped, and you can see how often they happened, what
Mm,
was the error exactly. This is also super useful. This can be also correlated with logs or traces. So this is a feature that I also wanted to highlight, which I personally use as well, which might be
got it.
useful to others as well.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And it looks like, you know, if it's something that you're expecting and you just want to clear it off, you can ignore it. You can mark it as resolved if you ship to fix, and that way it'll kind of show up again if you didn't actually fix it or disappear otherwise, which is also very helpful. And that, I think, is a great stopping point. This has been excellent. Where else should people go if they want to learn more? I'm gonna drop a couple links. You sent me a blog post about how to monitor New Relic or next sites on New Relic. So I'm gonna share this in the chat for everyone. Anywhere else that you want to shout to?
I guess New Relic documentation is a good resource.
Great. Yeah, let me
Uh,
throw in the a link to the docs page here. We'll throw this up as well. There it is. And then any others?
if someone wants to reach me personally, they can do so with visiting my webpage and or maybe a GitHub profile. And
Yeah, let's throw here's Matt's website one more time. Web dev engineer, an excellent GitHub user or an excellent domain name. We've also got here's your GitHub profile. So if you've got questions, you want to find the demo. Wait, why did that
oh,
open the
and
same one?
one more actually thing that the blog post that you linked to, it also has a repo. And if anyone has an issue with anything with the instrumentation of Next.js application or maybe T3 application,
Mm-hmm.
then you can just write an issue and I'm gonna respond. I'm the maintainer of the repo, so
That's in
feel free
this
to
this blog post here.
yeah, yeah.
Great. So this is linked in the show notes if you want to get in here, and you can send questions directly to Matt via GitHub issues. With that, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking some time with us, Matt. This episode, like every episode, has been live captioned. We have had Ashley from the White Coat Captioning team here with us all day. Thank you very much, Ashley. This episode and all of Observability Week is being brought to you special from New Relic. So thank you, New Relic, for putting this together. We've got Netlify, NX, and Pluralsight also kicking in as sponsors to help me cover the live captioning and a bunch of other things that keep the show running smoothly. And we have a whole lot of good stuff coming up. We've got Daniel Kim from coming in to do day 3 of Observability Week. We're going to talk about location-based Next.js middleware and something really cool called called synthetics, which we'll talk a little bit more about tomorrow. And then on Thursday, this isn't related to Observability Week, but we've got Nat Allison coming in. We're going to do some generative art. It's going to be an absolute blast. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is you want to do to make sure you don't miss an episode. With that, I think we're done. Matt, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. Chat, as always, thank you for taking your time out of your day to learn a little bit with me. We will see you all
It's been
next time.
it's been absolute pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Matt. Bye.